So now let's get back to what actually happened on the Corvette video.
On the Corvette.
Because it was quite an interesting one. It was first of all, our first time ever filming a car. We had very little clue on different angles. We had so much extra footage. Like how many gigabytes of footage was
I think it was about 100 gigabytes. And for comparison, a normal one's about 40 gigabytes. This was over 100 gigabytes.
Which is like nearly three times as much, maybe nearly 4 times as much footage as we normally would do these days. But we had incredible amounts of footage, loads of things. We could probably have like an 8-hour director's cut if we really wanted to put that together.
Well, luckily you're not the one editing that.
Yeah, well, Connor's doing the editing, and I just say, "Oh, that looks good."
You just let me have my way.
But I think let's get back to what actually happened.
So after we went to the car park and then did an interview, the interview went completely fine. All the questions went fine. Your dad was a good sport. He helped. We had your brother there who helped with questions. All went well. Then we went to go fire it up again. And what happened? Would not work.
No, would not stop.
And we were like, how's this happened? Because your dad sort of freshened up the engine. Yeah,
so my dad bought the car. I think it was maybe about 7 or 8 years ago, back in 2016, 2017.
Yep.
And the fellow who had the car before, he kept having gearbox issues. So the gearbox just keep giving him trouble. He'd sent the gearbox in the car to a guy in Northern Ireland who was supposedly the expert. He'd rebuilt the gearbox, I think it was twice, and just kept giving the same issue. Just kept burning the clutches in the gearbox. Now, my dad, he used to work in America, and we used to race cars. We used to build gearboxes all the time. So he completely dismantled the gearbox, dropped the gearbox out of the car, rebuilt the gearbox, new clutches, new everything. And since that day, he'd never given a single bit of bother. Then about just after COVID hit, he had a bit of an issue with the engine. It blew a head gasket, actually. Just from the age or whatever it was, the car hadn't been driving much, etc.
It's pretty high mileage, isn't it?
About 130, I think it is. I'm not too sure. But
high enough, but like...
Yeah, it's high, but it's also a V8, so you got less load and it's not very high compression. But he had the head gasket blow on him. So what he did was he actually completely dismantled the engine, rehoned it, took the pistons out, new sleeves, new whatever the car needed. So it had everything it needed. He put new sensors, etc. into it. So all really, really, really good stuff, and cars running beautifully, no issues at all, started every time. Probably one of the most reliable cars we had.
So, yeah.
Do you know what actually happened?
I do.
Go for it.
It was the immobilizer, wasn't it?
No, it wasn't.
You said it just wasn't one to start.
At the time, we thought it was an immobilizer, right? Because the key has a small little chip in it.
Yeah.
And whenever the key goes into the ignition, it should recognize the chip. So we thought, okay, well, maybe the immobilizer isn't working, or the battery, or there's a bad connection. Because whenever you crank it, it still cranks, but it's just not giving any spark.
Yeah.
Right? So actually, after this year, after the whole video, over the last few weeks and months, we've actually had a look at it. And it's not the mobilizer. The mobilizer is working fine.
Okay, good.
There is spark, right, on the spark plugs. The spark plugs are working. Everything's working fine. It's actually a sensor. It's called opticom, I think it's called.
Where?
Basically, it goes on the distributor on the engine, right? Mm-hmm. And what happens is whenever the crank is spinning, or the camshaft, it basically registers the position and tells it when to spark. But now, my dad was saying that when he was driving it that day, it over-revved, and he thinks what he's done is he's spun the shaft off the opticom.
Oh.
Or melted it, or whatever there. So that's actually what I think the issue is. The issue is he's actually messed up a sensor. So he's replaced the 2 or 3 other sensors that possibly could be, and the opticom is the last thing to be replaced.
Yeah.
So
is the opticom hard to replace?
Yeah, it's kind of difficult. You've got to kind of have the car on the left. You've got to get some bits
Is it basically a
dismantled.
whole engine out type job?
I don't think so. I think you can just kind of do it without having to take the whole engine out, but there is a decent bit of work to get to it. So that's what needs to be done there. But sure, that's what it is. Yeah, and to be fair, it runs pretty well. But as well, your dad was driving that thing pretty hard.
He was
definitely giving a good push in for us.
Yeah.
He was.
I really appreciated that. He did a couple of burnouts, things like that.
Yeah, it was. Like, the nice thing was all on private roads as well, so we could have a bit of fun without having to worry about anything.
Exactly, that was the benefits with doing that.
So, but no, it's a great car, and I love it. It's panoramic roof. It's got the full glass all around. Yeah. It can be a bit weird when you're driving down the road. Like,
Yeah.
especially when I used to pick me
obviously-
up from school and I get into the driver's seat because it's left-hand drive.
Yeah.
You know, get into the passenger seat, it looks like you're driving around.
Yeah.
So, you know, you're driving around and everyone's like, oh, looks like a young kid's driving that car. But it was actually, my dad was driving on the left-hand side.